Some killers leave behind clues, but the Black Dahlia, she left behind a crack, a void that has never been filled. In 1947, the body of 22-year-old aspiring actress Elizabeth Short was found in a vacant lot in Los Angeles, cut in half, completely drained of blood, her mouth slashed from ear to ear. It was a murder that shocked the nation, and more than 75 years later, it remains unsolved. Who killed her? Why so brutal? And why, despite hundreds of suspects being investigated, has the killer's identity never been confirmed? But this isn't just a murder case. It's a symbol of obsession, a curse hanging over the city of dreams, where fame and darkness are only a blink apart. In this podcast series, we'll dive deep into the chilling details of the crime scene, the killer's twisted and taunting letters, a decades-long list of mysterious suspects, and how the media killed Elizabeth a second time with cheap, sensational headlines. This is the story of Elizabeth Short, not the Black Dahlia, and this is the journey to peel back the fog, to reclaim the identity of a woman forgotten in her own death. Are you ready to step into a nightmare with no end? On the morning of January 15th, 1947, Los Angeles was still half asleep. The city of Hollywood dreams hadn't fully awakened until a woman walking with her child passed an empty lot in Leimert Park. What she saw would send a chill through the entire nation. Lying in the grass was a woman's body, sliced cleanly in half, so precisely that at first glance it looked like a discarded mannequin. But it wasn't. It was the body of 22-year-old Elizabeth Short, a young aspiring actress with jet black hair, porcelain skin, and sorrowful eyes that always seemed to reach toward a spotlight that never belonged to her. There wasn't a drop of blood left in her. Both sides of her mouth had been slashed open from the corners to the ears. A terrifying Glasgow smile. There were no bruises on the body, suggesting the killer had washed her after death. Her internal organs had been removed, some placed far from the body, and more disturbingly, she had been posed deliberately, head tilted upward, arms stretched out, legs spread, like the killer was sending a message. The media exploded, police cordoned off the scene, but there were few clues. No blood, no murder weapon, no witnesses. Just a victim turned into a symbol of death, lying in the heart of a city lit by stars where people dared to dream of fame and glory. Elizabeth Short became the Black Dahlia, a nickname coined by the press, inspired by the popular noir film The Blue Dahlia and her mysterious all-black fashion style. But no one could have guessed that name would forever be tied to one of the most gruesome unsolved crimes in American history. And then, as death buried the dreams of a young woman, the real nightmare had only just begun. Just 3 days after Elizabeth Short's body was discovered, a strange letter arrived at the offices of the Los Angeles Examiner, the first newspaper to report on the case. No return address, no signature, just a plain white envelope with a chilling handwritten message in all capital letters. Here is a gift from the Black Dahlia Avenger. Inside were Elizabeth's personal belongings, her social security card, birth certificate, business cards, and a few personal photos, all wiped clean with gasoline to remove fingerprints. And most disturbing of all, the message was constructed from words cut out of newspapers, like a twisted game, a psychopath playing cat and mouse with the police and the public. But it didn't stop there. A few days later came a second letter, this time a bold challenge. Catch me if you can. Black Dahlia Avenger. Each letter was a grotesque performance, a cold, calculated mind game. This wasn't just about murder. The killer wanted control over the investigation, over the headlines. Like a director orchestrating a deadly drama from behind the scenes, the police were at a loss. A special task force was formed, more than 750 officers. They interviewed thousands of people, combed through every lead, but every trail went cold. The press went into a frenzy, the public descended into panic, and the killer, if he was still out there, watching from the shadows, was probably smiling, knowing the entire city was hanging on to his every move. Was someone really toying with everyone? Or was it just a ploy for attention? Whatever the truth was, one fact remained. Elizabeth died in agony, and her killer had yet to show his face. The letters kept coming, some threatening more deaths, some confessing, others silent and eerie, like fear itself slipping into every corner of LA. This was no longer just a murder case, it was a stage, and the Black Dahlia, just the opening act in a long, dark performance. The Black Dahlia case shocked the entire nation, but for the Los Angeles Police Department, it became a never-ending nightmare. In the first few weeks, hundreds of people called in, wrote letters, and even confessed to killing Elizabeth Short. Some just wanted fame. Some were clearly mentally unstable, but buried in the chaos, police managed to narrow down a few suspects who seemed more credible. The first suspect was a former serviceman who had once been involved with Elizabeth. He lived a reclusive life, had a history of violence, and had been arrested before for assaulting women. But after days of intense interrogation, the police had to let him go. No evidence, no confession, no trace at the crime scene. The second suspect, more bizarre, was a surgeon. He lived in a lavish mansion, had medical training, and most chilling of all, the skills to dissect Elizabeth's body with unnerving precision. His name was George Hodel. George had a dark past. He'd been investigated for incest, accused of disturbing behavior, and had ties to people in the art world and LA's upper social circles. An anonymous letter once accused him of involvement in Elizabeth's murder, but there was no concrete evidence, and a few years later, he quietly left the US. It wasn't until decades later that Steve Hodel, George's own son and a former LAPD detective, reopened the case file on his father. Using old photographs, audio recordings, and journal entries, Steve made a bold claim. His father was the Black Dahlia killer. The revelation exploded in the media, not just for its shock value, but because it pulled back the curtain on the darkness lurking beneath 1940s Hollywood glamour. But George Hodel was already dead. He couldn't be questioned. He couldn't be tried. In LAPD's records, over 150 suspects were listed, but no one was ever convicted. No confession held up, no arrest ever stuck. It was as if the Black Dahlia hadn't just died. She'd been murdered by a ghost, one who knew how to erase every trace, vanish into the chaos of the city, and leave behind nothing but a trail of unanswered questions. When Elizabeth Short's body was found, the media descended like a pack of wolves smelling blood. Instead of honoring the dead, the American press at the time, especially the Los Angeles Herald-Express and the Examiner, turned Elizabeth's death into a sensational tragedy, deliberately dramatized. They gave her the nickname the Black Dahlia, a name that was seductive, cold, mysterious, and entirely marketable. Rather than focusing on the pain, on justice, on finding the killer, reporters dug into her private life, hunted down old photos, fabricated stories, and painted a completely distorted portrait. A girl who was promiscuous, who loved wearing black, who was wild, had a complicated love life, and lived off men. But in reality, Elizabeth was a fragile, impoverished young woman. She came from a broken family, had spent years living in Florida, worked as a waitress, and carried with her a dream of becoming an actress. She once wrote to her mother, "I'm doing okay, Mom. I'm still going to auditions. I haven't made it yet, but I'm trying. I want to be on the screen so you can be proud of me." But the press didn't care about that. They rewrote Elizabeth into a shadowy icon because it made the case more shocking, more gripping. At one point, a reporter from the Examiner even called Elizabeth's mother to break the news of her daughter's death. But first, he pretended Elizabeth was alive, said she'd just won a beauty contest, just to keep her on the phone longer and extract personal details. Then he dropped the bombshell. Did you know her body was just found? That wasn't journalism. That was a second crime. The 1950s America was still steeped in judgment against single women trying to survive in big cities. To the media, Elizabeth wasn't just a murder victim. She was on trial for her lifestyle, her clothes, her friends, her choices. The killer may have never been caught. But the victim? She was killed twice, once by the knife and once by cheap, cruel headlines. And the public, at first sympathetic, slowly turned skeptical, even contemptuous. That was the moment the truth began to be buried, not in blood, but in words written for profit. Time passed. The sensational headlines were slowly replaced by newer crimes. But the name Black Dahlia never disappeared. It became an obsession, not just for America, but for everyone who had ever touched the case file. The LAPD investigated hundreds of leads. They looked into nearly 200 suspects. Ex-lovers, co-workers, acquaintances, doctors, lawyers, soldiers, even artists. But every single lead led to the same place, nowhere. There were handwritten letters. There were confessions. There were late-night phone calls from people claiming to be the killer. But none of it was convincing enough to secure a conviction. The police even used lie detectors, a new technology at the time, but they proved ineffective. They took fingerprints, collected hair samples, analyzed handwriting. But it all felt like a game of chase in the fog. The case quietly slipped into obscurity. No conclusion, no closure. Only a lingering shadow, left behind in the open files, in the eyes of retired detectives, and in the memories of the victim's family. Nearly 60 years later, a former investigator, Steve Hodel, son of suspect George Hodel, reopened the file and launched his own investigation. Among the forgotten case documents, he found an old audio recording from 1950, in which George is heard saying, "Supposing I did kill the Black Dahlia. They couldn't prove it now. They can't talk to my secretary because she's dead." That tape had been buried in sealed archives, never made public for decades. But even so, the law could no longer touch a dead man. There was no DNA testing back then, no living witnesses, no physical evidence that could stand in court. The Black Dahlia case became a scar that would never fully heal in American criminal history. Elizabeth Short, a young woman who once dreamed of Hollywood, was reduced to a name in a file. A face distorted by the media, a victim buried twice, once by the earth and once by forgetting. And the killer? Maybe still smiling, somewhere out there, or from a past that never truly went to sleep. The Black Dahlia case didn't remain confined to police files. It crossed the boundaries of law and old newspaper columns, seeping into American pop culture like a bloodstain that could never be washed away. From the late 1940s to today, Elizabeth Short has become one of the most haunting figures in Hollywood's history. Not because of what she did, but because of how people chose to remember her death. The Black Dahlia case inspired, or more accurately haunted, dozens of crime novels, films, and television shows. Each work carried a piece of the obsession, a different lens on death, justice, and truth. Most notably, there's James Ellroy's novel, The Black Dahlia, a fictionalized retelling that turned Elizabeth into a dark symbol within Los Angeles' underbelly. Ellroy himself admitted he was haunted by the case for personal reasons. His own mother was murdered when he was a child. The book was later adapted into a film of the same name in 2006, starring Scarlett Johansson and Josh Hartnett. Though controversial, the film proved one thing: Elizabeth's death was never forgotten. It was retold again and again, like a never-ending tragedy. Beyond novels, the case has been explored in documentaries, true crime podcasts, and hit shows like American Horror Story and Criminal Minds. The image of the bisected body, the horrifying Glasgow smile, and the ransom-style letter have become crime law legends. But amid this constant retelling, the real Elizabeth Short slowly faded. She was no longer a daughter, no longer the 22-year-old woman with a gentle smile and a dream of acting. She became a symbol, a tragic archetype. She became the Black Dahlia, not Elizabeth. Her name lives on, but not in the way she would have wanted. Elizabeth's death, in a twisted and tragic way, made her immortal, but it was an immortality born in darkness, etched in blood-stained pages, horror films, and thousands of unanswered theories. More than 75 years have passed since the day Elizabeth Short's body was found. The world has changed. Los Angeles has grown. New footsteps echo down old streets, but somewhere, deep in America's collective memory, the nightmare called Black Dahlia still hasn't ended. There was no conviction, no killer brought to light, no warm embrace for Elizabeth's mother on the final day she laid her daughter to rest. All that remains are theories, black and white photographs, dusty case files, and a silence that chills to the bone. Some say Elizabeth was a victim of her time, of a Hollywood that was glamorous but cruel, of a society that left no room for fragile dreams, of a justice system sometimes powerless against cold, calculated evil, but more than anything, she was a real person. A young woman who once wrote gentle letters to her mother, who wore berets, red lipstick, and smiled brightly in photos with friends, who worked hard just to survive in a city that never quite felt like home, who dreamed a simple dream to one day see herself on the silver screen. No one, no matter who they are or how they lived, deserves to die the way Elizabeth did. Her death became a fracture in a generation's belief in justice, a reminder that not all paths lead to light, that sometimes evil doesn't hide in the shadows, but walks in broad daylight, manipulating, calculating, and staying silent. We may never know who killed her, but that doesn't mean Elizabeth Short is just another unsolved case. She was real, a daughter, a friend, a young woman with a heart full of hope. And if history cannot give her justice, then at the very least, we can give her back something she was robbed of long ago: dignity, memory, and compassion. Goodbye, Elizabeth. Your dream may have been broken, but your name will no longer be twisted beneath the cold glare of headlines. Today, we speak your name again, not as the Black Dahlia, but as Elizabeth Short.